back, my beautiful friends.
That was weird.
Welcome back, my lovely friends. Now we make us a bamboo bow.
Welcome back. We've got our bamboo clamped on top of the bow. So we're gonna pull the clamps off, see what this thing looks like. I think our next step's gonna be to sand the bamboo down to the ipe on the sides, and then we are going to kind of rough shape out our riser, which is the handle area of the bow, and then we're gonna put the tips on. We glued some wood together for our tips, right here, and we will add that wood to the tips of the bow. That's the plan for today, and if we can, we'll talk a little bit about our tillering jig. Let's do it.
First, the clamps come off, and then the bow comes out of the form. And you can see we have those nice upward turned limbs, just like a recurve bow should look.
So I don't know a ton about bows, but this looks pretty cool. It's a good start. We have things kind of roughed out. So I'm gonna go over to the bandsaw now, and I'll cut all the excess bamboo off the sides of our bow, and then we'll go over to the belt sander and tune it up. I'm gonna wear a mask while I'm doing this because bamboo is supposed to be really, really bad to breathe, or bamboo dust, I should say. So I'll wear a mask the whole time I do this.
I wasn't sure how the bamboo was going to cut on the bandsaw because I've never worked with it before, but it actually cut really easily. It wasn't a problem at all. After cutting the bow on the bandsaw, I then went over to the belt sander. You can see I didn't anchor the bow to the belt sander, which you should always do, but I was being very careful when I did it. I finally went over to the orbital sander and sanded everything out. Then I glued on my tips. To glue on my tips, I took the wood that we glued together for our tip material, I put it on the very ends of the bows, and then I traced it out. I then carefully cut out the tip material on the scroll saw. Once the tip material was cut out on the scroll saw, I then glued it together. Here I'm using a 2-part epoxy. This is a special glue that comes in 2 parts.
I am wearing gloves because I do not want to get epoxy on my fingers for a change.
You stir it together, and then you clamp the object you want to clamp. It only takes about 5 minutes to dry, so it's a nice alternative to yellow glue or other glues that take hours to dry. It's also fairly strong. Once my tips were laid out, then I located where I wanted the handle of the bow to be. I made a template, and I traced out the template for the handle. I went over to the bandsaw after this and carefully cut out the curved part of the handle or the riser. These are called the fades. Once the fades were cut out, I then sanded them carefully on the oscillating spindle sander, and then I cut out the window for our arrow. You need to be able to rest the arrow on something, and you need to be able to see where it's going to go, so this is called the window. It also includes the arrow rest, or the place where the arrow will actually sit. Finally, I went over to the orbital sander and lightly sanded the back of the bow, and then sanded out my tips. The tips need notches in them, or nocks, so the string will actually sit on the bow limb and not come off. You can see I'm using a rat's tail file to make a nice shallow knock.
So this is the point where the rubber meets the road. We are now going to put the string on this thing. When we put the string on, we can't just put the string on and start shooting it. It's not going to work that way. This bow isn't ready yet. What we need to do is put a long string on, and then we're going to do what's called tillering it. By tillering it, we're going to slowly bend the bow, and we're going to see how it bends and what it looks like. It's probably not going to bend evenly. So after we check it out in our tillering jig, which I'll talk about in a second, we'll then remove wood from the back until we get a nice even bend. Also, we want to set this bow so that the draw weight is right. We want to make a bow that when we pull back on it, it pulls back to about, about 35, maybe 40 pounds of weight. So to do that, we have to incorporate a scale into the tillering jig we're going to make. So I keep mentioning this tillering jig thing. what we need to do is make a special jig that can hold the bow so we can pull down and bend the bow and also check the weight as we're pulling down. The jig also needs to have some lines in it so we can check to see that our bow is bending evenly. Just for the record, I've never done this before, so we're going to make a quick tillering jig. After that, I'll show you how it's set up, and we'll start bending this thing and see what happens. Let's hope that the bow doesn't break. All right.
Because this was a brand new thing, I thought we should sketch the tillering jig before we made one, just so we had an idea of what we were doing. After I had it all sketched out, I built the jig. The center of the jig has a post that slides back and forth between two bracket pieces. Behind this, on a piece of plywood, there are a bunch of evenly drawn lines. I then screwed it all together. Once I had it all screwed together, I then mounted the whole contraption on the back wall of the wood storage room. When we come back tomorrow, we'll take a look at the tillering jig in action and try to tiller our bow. I'll see you guys then.